All right, on one of what I will say is one of the more important podcast episodes that I have done to date. Last night, as of the time of this recording, I was perusing through LinkedIn and I came across a very interesting article that I clicked on. I follow the thought leader, if you will. Well, that individual was talking about the job openings from, in the construction industry and how construction management is at a prime. And I know this to be true from numerous metrics. Number one, the headhunting industry, the industry that reaches out and tries to recruit, whether they're trying to recruit from, current existing employers and trying to take you away, or, just trying to, in general, bring you into some completely different industry. Companies seem to be more prone to resorting to headhunting, which makes it seem like it's easier. But in the long term, all we're really doing is internally competing for the same number of individuals. I might also add that this has been a topic of discussion for a couple of decades in the industry. And more specifically, this has also been something that a lot of individuals have talked about, some of us more than others. This is especially true for a lot of apprentice coordinators, training directors, and individuals who are active in the mentoring process. What we have seen and what we have basically experienced is a continual push, a continual shift, a continual direction and paradigm change where contractors have said, indeed, the entire industry in large part, have said, I don't have time to train apprentices. I don't have time to train the next generation. I need somebody with 20 years of experience. Well, all those individuals that have 20 years of experience or more are all working. And they are also the ones that a lot of companies via the headhunting route are actively pursuing to some degree. So what do we do then if indeed this article was right? Which, by the way, I have certainly believed this to be the case. I've talked about this before on this platform. I've written articles about this. I've had conversations with other creators, other podcasters, individuals out in the field, company, business reps, etc. This is certainly within the realm of not just possibility, but probability. Well, one of the things that I have seen, and I'm bolstered by this, is larger apprentice classes. This is a good thing in my estimation. I have been teaching apprentices for a long time now. It is part of the mentoring process. I think that a lot of people should be mentoring much more than what we currently do. And I'm encouraged to see the number of apprentices as the classes begin to grow. To me, what this tells me is that to some degree anyway, contractors are seeing, experiencing, and beginning to understand the need to internally develop. That doesn't mean that, apprentices don't go through apprenticeships, because they certainly do, as they should. But what that means then is that the companies are actively, if you will, looking at apprentices as a long-term investment. Meaning, I'll put this apprentice on, we're going to go through they're going to go through an apprenticeship. They're going to come on board with us, and we're going to continue, we're going to expand their on the job training. And we're going to look at them as a long-term investment into the company. Indeed, when they look at things this way, what they are doing is investing not just in their company, which they most certainly are. They are also investing in the future of the entire industry, because whether, we look at it this way or not, we're all in this together. If there was only one construction company in the area, in any given area, that's a slippery slope. And the reason why I say that is because we don't have development. We don't have real investment. We have a severity of problems, if you will, that comes from this. So that's one way. And like I said, the past 2 or 3 years, I have seen a lot more apprentices on the job. I'm teaching more apprentices, and I am encouraged by seeing that. Likewise, one of the other additional ways kind of lumped into this is what I will say I'm starting to see more millennials more millennials that are, I don't want to say complete career restart, but it's sort of like that. And the reason why I bring this up, of course, is because I can, anecdotally, I've seen this. I've seen people who are in their mid to, approaching late 30s joining apprenticeships. Now, if you know anything about this podcast and anything about some of the content that we produce here on the podcast level, or also via the written word over at thewealthyironworker.com, then you know that I've continually said that culturally what we have done is sold millennials a bill of goods. We have sold millennials this bill of goods. And the reason I know this is because I am an old millennial. But what we did was we said, hey, you got to go to college to get a good job. And we talked down about the trades. We didn't, we never really acknowledged what I will say is the nobility of working with your hands, of seeing something done by the end of the day, and really truly tried to explore the nuanced substantive differences between the individuals who are attracted to the trades as opposed to individuals who seem drawn to more computer IT office side of the house. For my money, I believe that there's some substantial differences between the two. Some people are more driven towards tactile nature work, hands-on, physical, don't want to be, in a chair all day long, as it were. Whereas others seem to be more content, more prone to that draw. So when I see individuals who are millennials who seem to be gravitating towards a career change in the trades, I'm also encouraged by what I see there as well. But then I go and read articles that add to that LinkedIn article. And here is where we're going to plant the flag, and I want to have this long, nuanced conversation, if you will, about one of the articles that I found. And indeed, I'm going to read directly verbatim from these specific articles because I don't want to, I don't want to sum things up. I want you, the listener or the viewer, depending on how you consume your content, to be able to get it straight from the horse's mouth. Links will be in the description of the podcast show notes so you can go and substantively track this down. And here is, so in addition, this is the crux, this is where we're going to plant our flag, is that in addition to bolstering apprenticeship numbers, and in addition to older apprentices who've got a little bit more maturity beginning to, let's say, do a career restart, one of the other proposed ways is an H2C visa. And I'm going to explain what this is, but let me come right out the gate and I'm going to say this as clear as I possibly can. I am adamantly 100% opposed to any visa system that we have in place today. Adamantly. Doubly so for those that are proposed for the construction industry or the skilled trades in general. Adamantly opposed to it. Now, I'm not alone in this opposition, but there are some really powerful entities that are for this system. And I will tell you one of the reasons why, as we get into this, is going to be because it's cheap labor, where it will be. Mark the words, what I'm saying to you now. If enacted, it is a way to get cheaper labor overall. And we're going to get into, some of the nuanced stuff. And we're going to start with an article from Construction Dive. Now, this isn't the first article that I have seen and or read, but this is the one that I'm going to quote. Now, this is back in October. There's been renewed discussion about this. But from October, this was published, and the title of the article is Bill Proposes New Visa, a potential boon to construction staffing. Subtitle, and as immigration raids target workers on job sites, one bill seeks to provide lawful employment for employers in dire need of crews. Let's unpack this a little bit and take a look. Consequently, this is also one of the reasons why I'm still to this day still very bullish on podcast episodes and podcast content creators in the first place. Because if you hearken back to the gatekeeping podcast, I talk about how gatekeeping has changed. One of the ways that we used to see gatekeeping is that we just did not release a lot of data or information. And one of to not to steal too much thunder from that podcast episode, but one of the things that we do is that we hold all the chips close to us and we don't share anything. And the best example, or one of the best examples, would be OSHA. How would you know what OSHA says if I don't tell you what they say? Now, with the advent of the internet, you can find a lot more information online. It's very difficult to hide it. And now, because of that, the nature of gatekeeping has changed. We will have disinformation that's perpetuated. We will have narratives that are driven via propaganda. And then, of course, we'll also distract the American public with things that are humorous, sexually provocative, etc., and you're distracted overall. And what happens? I'm saying we very loosely, as if I'm, including myself into those individuals who want to get things done, who want to peddle propaganda and have an agenda and a narrative. We, those individuals, are able to get a lot of this done by simply having people who toe the line and are distracted and believe one-liners and believe low-hanging fruit that is often held out in front of people. This is one of those things. The idea, before I even get into the meat of this article, the idea that you cannot find people to employ is in large part laughable. And here's why I say this, all right? The unemployment, when you look at the unemployment rate, now the from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the unemployment rate was 4.6%. And you might think, well, that's pretty low. Okay, I'll give you that. But one of the things that, let's say people on the right, one of the things when somebody's on the left, and they do it back and forth, but when somebody on the right, when there is somebody on the left who has control of government, and they might say, well, unemployment's low. What happens is the opposite side will automatically bring up, yeah, you're saying that unemployment is low, but you're not highlighting the percentage of Americans who are participating in the labor force, or those who have completely left the labor market. And this happens all the time. Depends on who you're listening to. If you listen to left-leaning media, this is not something that you're really going to hear when, somebody that politically aligns with you is in power. It is something, however, that you'll hear when the opposition, if you're drawing your lines politically, when somebody on the right is in office, it is something that you're likely to hear more talked about. Flip the script. It is also likely to be something that is talked about on the right when somebody on the left is in power from a political perspective. I am an equal opportunity offender. I do not care. Let's talk about what is actually happening. So I did. Before I get into this particular article from Construction Dive on the new visa, we need to unpack. We need to understand what they're saying when it comes to we're unable to fill construction jobs. Let me make sure that I'm clear on this before we even get into the visa, because it paints the narrative. It paints a picture that contrasts the narrative to some degree. So with that in mind, we're going to go over to a website called Marketplace that was back in June of 2025. Now, I don't know about you, but one of the things that I have routinely seen in the news, not in your legacy news, I don't pay any attention to legacy news whatsoever, but in sound bites and snippets, and you see it on social media, and then I'm also on Reddit quite frequently. There is a subreddit called Layoffs, and you see it over and over and over again. Layoffs. You might maybe tech, right? When it comes to AI, and this, caveat, AI is going to be a very interesting, let's say, wedge it's going to, at some point, clearly delineate. It's going to clearly identify and define what really is taking place in the economy if the projections turn out to be true and how many jobs are going to be lost to AI. That whole dynamic is going to be interesting to see for a number of reasons, which we will obviously explore as time goes on. But those layoffs seem to be a thing that are recurring. Microsoft and a lot of big tech companies seem to be laying off. Keep that in mind as we kind of go through this particular article, because that plays a part in this concept or idea where I said earlier that some of the some of the younger millennials, but they happen to be older apprentices because they're almost starting over in a completely new industry, which is what I assess to be the possibility of some of these other individuals as American citizens that could do the very same thing to fill said jobs that construction firms say they're not getting filled. So this article was written in June of 2025 and it's titled "More Americans Are Dropping Out of Labor Force Job Report Shows." Subtitle, this is an interesting one. Americans 24 and younger are helping drive the trend. Quote, in the latest jobs report out Friday, there's some details to like and some to be worried about. And then they go on through, but it says, on the maybe we should worry about this side, the labor force participation rate, aka the percentage of Americans either working or actively looking for work, dropped to 62.4%, which is well off the recent highs of the past couple of years. So just how concerned should we be? Sometimes there are positive reasons people leave the labor force. Older workers finally reaching a planned retirement, younger workers going back to school for an advanced degree, your crypto-loving cousin cashing out his Bitcoin to try van life for a few months, as they're jesting, of course. But economist Corey Stale at Indeed said lately the reasons aren't so positive. And what he says is, quote, there are some evidence that maybe people are saying, it's taking me so long to find a job. What am I doing? Right? Like, I'm just going to stop. About 6 million people last month wanted a job, weren't in the labor force. It's 300,000 more frustrated people than in April of 2025. Stale said in certain industries like tech, dwindling job openings may be keeping potential workers on the sidelines. So what we see in the Indeed job postings data is that as of the end of May, that software development job postings were about 40% below where they were in February 2020, he said. And then get this. Much of the drop in May labor force participation was driven by workers age 24 or younger. End quote. Now, here's what I would like to allude to. If that is the case, I'm taking it as the gospel, and if we're looking at if much of this is driven by individuals who are 24 years of age and younger, they are prime time candidates for the construction industry. And what I'm getting at is there was a number up there earlier. I talked about 300,000 more frustrated people. About 6 million wanted a job but weren't in the labor force. There are Americans out there who have opted out of the labor force. You might be inclined to ask why they are opting out of the labor force. There's a multitude of reasons, none of which this podcast is really aimed at trying to explain, except the probability that many of these jobs are asking for paltry wages, I've seen this over and over again where individuals are asking for enormous amounts of experience and want to pay pennies on the dollar, if you will. And if you pay bills like I do, you understand just how much money it takes to pay for your rent and or house payment, to pay for your power, all your utilities, the internet, the phone that you got to have for work. It seems like your car, insurance, gas, all of that. Never mind what we're talking about with food and kids and all that kind of stuff. Here's what I'm doing. I'm going to offer you this job, or I'm sorry. Here's what we're doing. I'm going to have this job opening and I don't have any nibbles. I wonder why. It very well could be that your economic model, from a contractor perspective, is built on ridiculously low wages, which I might add is a good segue into our initial article that we were going to look at, Construction Dive. Again, published in October 2nd of 2025, quote, legislation reintroduced to Congress last month could help construction employers desperate for a reprieve from the labor shortage while also addressing immigration reform. Your antennae should go up, as did mine. As Immigration and Customs Enforcement has stepped up raids on job sites, arresting unauthorized workers and preparing them for deportation, construction has seen a critical mass of its labor force impacted. Interesting. It continues. In the most high-profile case, hundreds of federal agents arrested 475 workers at a construction site in Georgia on September 5th. Many of the workers were South Korean. At the time, White House border czar Tom Homan said President Donald Trump's administration would continue to ramp up raids on U.S. workplaces. Get this. An estimated 23% of construction workers are unauthorized to work in the U.S. Now, think about that number right there. For those of you who are in the construction industry, for those of you who are thinking about getting into the construction industry, for those of you who might be looking for a different job, looking for a change in a career, looking to build something that's substantive, that's robust, that allows you to be able to provide for your family in the construction industry, an estimated 23% of construction workers are unauthorized or illegal in the United States. Now, why does that matter to you? Well, number one, you are in direct competition with these individuals. And because they are unauthorized, and I don't even want to get into the subject of whether or not there should be amnesty. Because they are unauthorized, they are willing to work for less because they are here in the country illegally. That's the first thing. And when that happens, number two, wages are driven down. If my business, I don't care what model it is, I don't care what industry it is, if it is built on using illegal labor to depress wages, which is what the construction industry has dealt with for decades, it needs serious revamping. We have serious issues when actual Americans should be able to go out and afford a 40-hour a week or more, depending on the job, because that's how the construction industry is, feast or famine. And we have what I just say earlier, 6 million in the previous article, Americans looking for a job. Now, to be sure, not every single one of them is cut out for the trades, but you are not going to sit here and convince me that out of the number of young people that are out there and the number of individuals who are trying to provide for their family, that they're not going to be able to restart their career with a good job when they are in direct competition with individuals who are here unauthorized and the wages are deflated. They are depressed. This is a direct slap in the face of every single American that is out there today. And what do companies do? They go to Congress with enormous amounts of money pay them in lobbying instead of looking to invest in current Americans, cry, woe is me, I can't fill this job for the paltry wage that I'm offering. Oh, by the way, we need a different level solution like the white collar world does, the visa system. And I hope to have a different podcast episode later on with a real, robust, substantive discussion with somebody who is far more well-versed in the visa system than I am when it comes to the white collar and I mean, when I say this, this is not hyperbole. I mean rampant abuse. Rampant. This is, to be sure, it has not been said this way, but this is what's being advocated for. We want a visa system that allows us to be able to bring in cheaper labor, quote unquote, legally, to then compete with the American worker. This is why I said at the outset of this podcast episode, I am vehemently against any and every visa program the United States has in effect today. Even for the visa systems that are in place today in the white collar world, the only way that a company should be able to bring a visa, an individual from overseas on the visa, is if they spend 25 to 50% more than what it would cost them to employ an American. If they're saying that I have to have this guy's talent, this guy's brains, I've got to have their skill level, you need to pay for this. This is a direct slap in the face. And quite frankly, this is where it gets to the heart of the matter. When I say something to the effect of the economy should work for the people, not the other way around, which is how it's currently structured today. You, the American worker, the American citizen, exist to prop up this economy. And when you are asking for more because artificially inflated assets take more of the income that you make, in addition to the fact that there's a whole host of Americans who are economic slaves, that takes more of your money as well. When you're asking for more money to just quite simply be able to live and not live to work, we want to be able to bring in foreign workers under the H-2C visa. Let me read you some of those details and specifics for the H-2C visa. Quote, on September 18th, Representative Lloyd Schmucker, Republican from Pennsylvania, resubmitted a bill previously put on the floor that would amend the Immigration and Nationality Act. The Essential Workers for Economic Advancement Act would create a new visa, the H-2C visa, for non-agricultural workers. Businesses could use H-2C visas to fill jobs that have remained open for 3 consecutive months or more than 60 days in a 90-day period and are located in a region where the unemployment rate is 7.9% or less. The bill puts a 65,000 job cap on the number of positions that could qualify during the first fiscal year of H-2C visa use. This, in my opinion, is a travesty. All you have to do as a company is offer you can listen, they've already learned the lesson from white collar workers. All they really need to do is put out a bogus job. Say, hey, this job hasn't been filled for 3 months because the wages are low. We need to fill this job. I need to fill this job. And I've already demonstrated that the unemployment rate, it says 7.9, but what that doesn't take into consideration is the number of Americans who are actively participating in the workforce. If you have a whole host of Americans who have given up looking for jobs, that doesn't qualify or count into the unemployment calculus. And I've already said this, both sides use that argument against the other when it's their turn to critique whoever's in power. So it's an enormously disingenuous perspective to state this. Enormous. And at the crux of it all is the desire. We're losing our unauthorized or illegal workforce through deportations and ICE. Our business model is quote unquote built on this. Ergo, we want a legal ramified way. And so the construction industry, you know what the construction industry does? It just gets squeezed and squeezed and squeezed some more from illegals from the bottom and from actual legal petitioned employment from immigrants overseas from the top. And I ask you, knowing what I have already said in this podcast episode today, who does this benefit? Does this benefit the massive number of Americans who are not participating in the workforce by bringing in, and they say 65,000? Listen, do your research. There are supposed caps on the H-1B visa and the visa system in general that are used in the primary white collar world. They are abused, and it is a rampant system. Rampant. And I have been following this quasi closely. There is somebody who I am going to reach out to at a later date to have a long form conversation or two about this. And you might think, well, why does this matter to the white collar world? Because I said a while back internally, it wouldn't surprise me to see them try this in the construction industry. Lo and behold, I give you examples of this very thing where they are petitioning individuals. This is problematic. This is troublesome. This is a travesty. This is garbage. This is not in accordance or any kind of benefit to the actual American worker. We should have actual programs that gear them to, and again, I'm in the apprenticeship program. I like the idea. I love the idea of ramping things up and going with a registered apprenticeship program. Companies have already tried to take out the registered apprenticeship program model with IRAPs in the past in the first place. That podcast episode is to come. IRAPs versus the gold standard in the Department of Labor's overseeing, when it comes to apprenticeship programs. Ramp it up. Make it a requirement that every contractor that's out there participate in this model so that we can train Americans and not bring in other forces and workers who compete with your job and my job, deflate wages, and make it even that much more difficult for us to live in our own country. I am adamantly opposed to the H-2C visa or any visa system in this country that is being used today. Any. If there is an American worker that's out of work, no. They need to be trained, and they need to be trained in accordance to be able to put them to work so that they may be able to go out and provide for their families. And until that is the case, you'll never see me support a visa system like what is being proposed today, currently, right now. What's already enacted back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and has become so exploitative. So exploitative. I don't want to see the construction industry take any more hits at all. I want to see actual honest Americans having a shot at earning a nice livable wage. So the H-2C visa, you ain't got my support. And hopefully you'll share this podcast episode out because it is not something that needs to gain any traction at all. It needs to be shot down and it needs to die 1,000 deaths. The H-2C visa or any form of visa that is aimed at trying to fill these quote unquote great jobs with paltry wages, go back to the drawing board. If you found this podcast helpful, I ask that you share it out, that you will help me get the word out, that you'll have conversations on the job site, conversations at home and around wherever you happen to gather with other people, and that you will point them to this podcast episode. The links are in the description so that you can go and check out the data that I mentioned during this podcast episode. And as always, you can reach out to me, ask questions, you can drop comments, concerns, whatever the case. And if you are interested in being on this podcast, be sure to go over to the contact page at thewealthyironworker.com. Leave me a comment. I check all my emails on the regular, and we will get in touch. Thank you for listening to what I consider to be an extremely important podcast. More to come. Stay safe out there, guys. I'll see you on the next one.